I led a small group online Bible study during the pandemic, and one night on Zoom, my friend Evelyn said, I quit my job to help my friend as she died. Now, Evelyn's comments were unexpected, to say the least. And our online small group had just been talking about our experiences, the things that had taught us to trust God. And that's when Evelyn began to share her story. I sat on the edge of my seat, leaning closer to the screen to listen because I didn't know what she was going to say yet. Next, several years before, a dear friend of Evelyn's had entered in the final painful stages of terminal cancer. Evelyn took a radical step of faith. She quit her job so that she could take her friend to doctor's appointments and simply spend time with her at her side before she passed. Incredibly, after her friend went to be with the Lord, Evelyn was able to quickly get her job back with a raise and a promotion. There was no question in Evelyn's mind. God provided what she needed so that she could be a help to her friend in need. As Evelyn wrapped up her story, she bore witness to God's loving kindness and his mercy. Evelyn's intentional unemployment and sacrificial care, coupled with God's provision, it's a powerful story in its own right. But here's what you don't know. Evelyn herself is battling cancer for the second time. Thanks to Zoom, I still get to be in Evelyn's orbit while she takes every precaution to protect her health. Her gorgeous, smiling, hopeful face, it appears on my screen every Wednesday night, her head crowned with a beanie because of chemo and radiation. Evelyn is a spiritual giant. She is beloved by church members here at our church, and she's known by her dearest friends as being faithful and generous. And when Evelyn's talking to you, you feel like you're the only person on planet Earth, like her only mission in life is to remind you of God's love. Evelyn has walked through this week's valley several times. She's got her frequent flyer miles under the shadow of death. She's breaking Fitbit records in the pits of cancer. And I want you to know how to resist fear when life bottoms out, and Evelyn is our example of how to do that. Whether you or your loved one are sinking down into the dust of hardship or crying out from the depths of your soul, this lesson is for you. Whether you or your loved one are on the brink of death or facing imminent danger, the crises in your life, it's not a surprise to God. Life's darkest experiences are valleys where Jesus travels with us. And you're going to see that clearly in our valley study this week, Psalm 23, the valley of shadow of death. What you're about to read in the study guide is a Hebrew poem written by King David. And you don't need to know anything about King David's story to know that he shares a lot in common with fellow valley travelers like Evelyn. David's poem in Psalm 23 is proof enough. Now, the book of Psalms is a collection of 150 songs in poetic form. So unless you're a rapper, a musician, or a poet, reading a psalm has its challenges. Like all poetry, the language is not precise. The imagery, allusions, and metaphors hold within them meaning beyond the words themselves. Many times, the sacred poetry paints a picture in our minds, and it brings shape to an intangible concept in our souls. In Psalm 23, the topic of this lesson, it's no different. In 6 short verses, the 23rd Psalm encapsulates staying hopeful when your life is at risk. If you ask someone in your life their favorite psalm, they're probably going to rank Psalm 23, what you're going to study this week. It's one of the most beloved, well-known, memorized song in the scriptures. And Psalm 23 is a part of a grouping of songs in the Bible designated as trust songs or confident songs. In light of what I've learned from my friend Evelyn, this makes total sense. How can a song about the terrors of our darkest valleys be an expression of trust and confidence? Because the darker the valley is, that's where God walks beside us, just like in the 23rd Psalm. And for me, this passage of scripture means a lot. It was my mainstay in college when my sibling attempted suicide. It was my mainstay when my parents went through bankruptcy, and then again. In my 30s, this psalm was the plumb line for me when my father-in-law was in quadruple bypass surgery and when my mom had a cancer diagnosis. The poem you're about to read functions as the first line of defense when I am scared to death and when I'm scared of death. And my prayer is that Psalm 23 becomes your song, the song you sing when you feel like you are in anguish. Because embedded in this poem is unwavering trust that we can walk with God through death valleys, things like cancer, hopelessness, divorce, any of those caverns that we find ourselves in. God is with us. And so before I send you back to the study guide, I want to share with you 3 things you're going to learn in Psalm 23. Okay, so just a heads up. Number 1, it's okay to be Jesus's needy sheep because Jesus is your good shepherd. So whether you value self-sufficiency or tend towards codependency, death valleys are great equalizers when it comes to our neediness. There are just some things you and I cannot climb our way out of, even though we might try. And that's why trying times are called times of need. You and I need help when we are in the lowlands of our life. And we don't got to lift ourselves up out of this pit or pull ourselves up by our bootstrap. We need a good shepherd, and you've got one. Jesus is never so busy with the other needy sheep that he can't take care of you. In fact, in Luke 15, Jesus says that even if he had 100 sheep, if one got lost, he's going to leave that 99 and he's going to come find you. So if you struggle to believe you are worth your good shepherd's care, maybe you need to focus on the fact that he is good and he can't be anything else. It's okay to be one of Jesus's needy sheep. The thing is, we can't be anything else. We are his sheep. He's the good shepherd, and not just any shepherd. He's the good one. You can count on his rod and his staff to steer you along into safety because his goodness and mercy, they're chasing you down. Number 2, I want you to see that it's okay to be Jesus' wandering guest. Jesus is your generous host. So recently we hosted our worship team for lunch at our home, and my 8-year-old son, Caleb, sheepishly admitted that he had directed one of our guests to use his own bathroom. And my cringe affirmed his concerns. Okay, so I'd cleaned the guest's bathroom, right? But Caleb reasoned that since the guest's bathroom was full when my friend needed to use the restroom, they could go potty in his room. Well, if you know anything about 8-year-old boys' bathrooms, it was pretty dirty. So I was imagining our guest wandering through a side of our house we rarely show our guests to view, and she had to go sprawl over Legos, like see the squalor of stinky post-sports, like socks and sticky messes of an elementary-aged child. And so when I texted her about this visit to our dirty bathroom, she replied with some laughing emojis because she's a mom too. She knew I would feel stressed about her seeing a bathtub covered in crayon marks. And she admitted she felt a little lost on the way to the bathroom, but she said it was just so precious how Caleb acted as the host of the house. And without me, my husband, or my mom around, Caleb made sure our guest had a place to use the restroom. You know, I think a lot of us feel like we're a wandering guest when it comes to the valley of our shadows. We don't know our way around. And we need directions when we're in the darkness. We're trying to keep our eyes straight ahead to our destination, but ultimately it's just too dark for us to see our way forward. And if that's you, if you feel out of your depth, know this: Jesus is a generous host. It brings him great joy to prepare a table for you where you will taste his provisions and inhale the fragrance of joy. When Jesus is your host, you leave the valley of shadow with more than what you need.